Okay,
You
so
ready?
wait, no, let me put on my ready glasses.
Oh
Hello.
man. Hello, Myriam.
Hello.
Um, okay, so we're gonna go. We're gonna do this.
We're gonna do it. I'm excited. I'm excited. I was trying to explain to my husband this morning what we were gonna talk about, and it made perfect sense to me. And I think it made sense to him, but I definitely was. It was so much. He was like, "Are you gonna pick one?" Or
Well,
like,
let me before you go any further, because the juicy stuff happens really fast, and I'm just going to
I know.
introduce us. Okay, so for this call is the Nerd Talk call, episode 1 with Myriam, Loeschen, and Ruth O'Donnell. It's being recorded on October 29th at 12 o'clock somebody's time. The time zones are all crazy in my brain. And we are having a discussion today. Myriam and I are foot nerds. We're going to have a discussion today that I think fits primarily into brain health, mental health, community pillars. Foot nerds are very adventurous souls who study through the Foot Collective. The Foot Nerd program is a project by the Foot Collective. And we study sleep, food, movement, mind or mindfulness, the mind pillar, which includes mental, emotional, spiritual health, community, and we're adding a new pillar called financial literacy. But we don't just study these topics academically. The brave and courageous part and unique part about this program is that we then take those tools and we apply them to our personal lives in an attempt to radically reclaim, in fact, our personal health and well-being. So I'm here with Myriam Loeschen. She's not only a foot nerd, but she is one of the most gentle, kindest. I won't blow it up too much because it might be a little bit of pressure, but she's my friend. Let's just suffice it to say that she is one of my closest friends in the whole entire universe. And I'm so happy to have her here today. So I want to start, Myriam. I want you to introduce yourself, a little bit about your background and how you found your way to the Foot Nerd program and why. And then we'll go from there.
Sure. First, I say thank you for that introduction and thank you for having me. I'm going to take my glasses off as I talk. I'll be putting those on and off because I've just gotten them and I'm getting used to using them. I am very happy to be here. I'm really excited to share just my own insights of things that I'm learning. I am a facilitator. I facilitate really, when I think about the term facilitation, I think about someone who, or the process or support in helping make things easier for people, whether that is professional development for faculty and teachers, or having difficult, courageous conversations around race and equity. I have come to the Foot Nerd program for after probably, I'd say maybe 10 years of sort of standing in the shadows with piqued interest in inspiration and being inspired by the way you have chosen to live your life and the choices that you've made to really explore and be curious about different ways to nurture yourself, not just food wise, but all of the ways. And I think probably in the last 3 years, my process became more embodied in a way that I sort of stopped looking externally and finally started looking internally. And I came to Foot Nerds because I was intrigued about the idea of having a supportive group that could have these conversations, as well as really encouraging people to be autonomous and make their own choices for what felt the best for them. I think in our society right now, in this sort of wellness culture, which is, I think, a little bit masked for diet culture. Someone, for me, speaking for myself, got really lost in that and tried a lot of different ways to what I'm finally understanding is find a lot of different ways to heal. But at the time it was, in the instance when I would try this program or that program or this program, I found that I was really trying to either run away from myself or I was trying to change myself, but not in a way that was loving or compassionate. And I find that not just the conversations and the participants in the Foot Nerd program offer that to me, but also just really energy wise, when I'm watching videos or I'm reading different conversations that I see online from the Foot Nerds, I just feel a sense of connection that we belong to one another. And that is not necessarily, I haven't really found that in other spaces. So there's a brownie here.
Oh my gosh.
And I belong to you and you belong to me. So
yes. Oh my God. Okay. So I have to say that this is an extremely important conversation for me to have with Myriam, because so I'm not really that interested in having the superficial conversations. And so throughout the year and a half that I've been involved in the Foot Nerd program, I've been also hiding behind the scenes of like we are connected and these Foot Nerds are really badass, courageous humans. With that being said, personally, there's an emotional body call that's led by the Urban Barefoot, who's called Jeff Shub, and he recently started an emotional body archetype call, and I started participating in those. And what I realized was that I want to have the conversations that matter the most. And being in the middle of this pandemic, where we are being consistently isolated from each other more and more, and what looks to me, from my perspective, to be an extremely fearful environment, cultural environment, that I feel a real call to be brave and have important conversations around connection, what it really means. And I'm even like, the word health has been on my radar a little bit, in the sense that like it repels me, that word, kind of like the word diet has been, I'm repelled to diet. And I think the reason is I'm interested in high quality of living. And when you say I belong to you and you belong to me, and these conversations, that if even like one person like gets one little gold nugget of encouragement to try something new, to become something different for themselves and the people around them, like my newest embrace, like this idea about embracing all, excluding nobody, has just been so strong in my field lately. And also not being afraid to really truly be myself, who is like a deeply feeling, spiritual, freaking, I want to sing and dance, and I hold back on that for whatever the stupid fears are. But they're real, right? And so
sometimes not all.
Yeah, not all the time.
No, and I'm not saying that in a really in a joking way. I'm saying I just want you to be mindful of your language, right? Because in certain situations, I think you're also really discerning about who you share that with, which is also a protective measure. So not to say that you're making choices to keep that. I'm sorry. You do make conscious choices with whom you share that side of yourself with, but for the most part, you really live from that place.
Yes.
So throw that out there.
Thank you, Myriam. So in preparation for this talk today, so that being said, Myriam is a perfect person to go into these conversations with, and I hope that we can have many more, because I think they're extremely valuable for our home, our personal selves, the people who live with us in our homes, and the communities around us, to encourage the idea of embracing all, excluding no one. And that means starting with the 70 trillion molecular geniuses that we call cells in our own body, right? So in preparation for this call today, Myriam and I asked Myriam if she wanted to have a conversation about some podcasts that I wanted to unpack. And then she sent me another podcast in return to unpack and that she thought was interesting that related to this. And then there was a third talk. So those are, and I'll put them in the links when we're finished and we load this into the Footnerd YouTube channel. I sent her a podcast with Dr. Rangan Chatterjee with David Bradford and Carol Robin. They wrote a book called Connect. They teach this course at Stanford. 85% of the student body, which I find interesting, take the course, even though it's an elective. They call it the touchy-feely course. And it's all about ways that we can have better relationships. And it's designed for like business majors, I think, or something like that, but all the students love it. And they have been teaching it for 20 years or something. Don't quote me on that. So that was the original podcast I wanted to unpack with Myriam, because we spend a lot of time on the phone talking about communication and how we do that. And usually when we talk on the phone, it's because we might have made a grand communication error and we need to bounce it off of each other. The next podcast that Myriam sent me, which it was so great, was Dr. Rangan Chatterjee again with Esther Perel talking about I forget what the name of it is, but essentially like we can't be who we are.
It's sort of like interconnectedness, right?
Yeah, we can't be who we are without being in relationship with the other. And this idea that,
we're shaped by one another, right?
Yeah, we're shaped by one another. Mm-hmm. And then the third one, which blew my mind and kind of sent me running for the hills, which I accidentally overlooked, was one about healing racialized trauma. And personally, I was like, I'm too scared, and I didn't even see that text for the longest time. And I don't think it was completely by accident. But when I found it, I listened to the interview with Resmaa Menakem. Mm-hmm. And so then we decided, so we don't know where this conversation is going exactly, but these are the themes that we're talking about, which are community, brain health, mindfulness, attention to exactly what you're doing at this very moment in time. And is everything okay?
I'm so sorry to do this, but I do want to acknowledge it just for a moment, just to say, is that I got a new phone yesterday and I have been pressing literally every button that says press. And so now for some reason, my messages and all the things are coming up here and I have no idea how to use it or to turn it off. So I really apologize. Can you hear that beeping?
I hear something.
Okay, so there's a beeping that was happening and something, and I'm not going to fuss with it, but
you want me to press pause? Because we could pause and then come back in 2 seconds.
No, I want to keep going. I just want to acknowledge that there might be some beeping happening, and I'm going to keep moving forward without paying attention to it because I don't need to see anything that's coming up. But
that's why your eyes were shifting from right to left.
I was like, what is happening? Because I didn't, you know what I think actually might be a good idea is if I just turn my phone off, then I won't get anything. Okay, I think, great. Okay, thank you. I apologize for that. I just am trying to.
No, it's what is it? What is it? Life, right? It's life.
Right, it's okay.
Okay, so with all that being said, Myriam, Joseph, where are we going first?
Okay, well, I was thinking about our recent conversation actually in preparing for this, and you were saying, and you actually left me a voicemail message and you said, oh, because we both listened to the message, the Connect interview, and then Esther Perel, and then we had a conversation. And I really thought it was just, we were right in sync. And then when I sent you the interview with Resmaa, you were like, oh, now I understand what you say. And so I realized, oh, I could see that they were all connected, but it took me a minute and then I've had a day or two to think about it. And I think, oh, how can we present this in a way that people follow our train of thought, right? Our train of thinking. And I think really, I would like to start with this idea of sharing just a little bit about my process and what I've been, and I'm finally have acknowledged and come to terms with the fact that this is a lifelong thing, right? I have for many years thought, I'll go to therapy, or I'll do this work, or I'll do this, and I'll do this. And then there's a finite ending where I'll just be, I don't know what the word is, perfect or well or whatnot. But I realize, oh no, it's just in process. So my epitaph will say, here lies a woman in process. You know, she's 130. And at the end, it'll say, she still never got there, wherever there is. But so what was meaningful to me is when you sent me the initial interview about connecting, is understanding more so what's working inside, right? How things are working inside. And I think one of the things that I have overlooked for many, many years is my connection to self. And I have looked externally for whether it's validation, information, resources, whatnot. And I have not connected with Myriam or myself at all, or not gone inward to recognize that I have within me the resources that I need to actually just even be curious about and to learn and process. So what was great about with that connect conversation was them sort of giving you tools, but really the invitation, I think, around all of this work is an invitation to be vulnerable and to allow for that to lead you to something, trust and have faith that that will lead you to something. And so that conversation was talking about relationship and how to be with different, how to engage with your partner. And while we've had, I don't know, 976,000 of those conversations, it really struck me in that this idea of self accountability, right? And awareness. They talk about awareness, like where does your head go? Where do your thoughts go? The thoughts and the feeling. And then how we react to people. And it just got me really thinking about the brain.
So just before you go on, let me just give anybody who hasn't listened to that Connect call. So they use the metaphor of the tennis court in communication. And I was really interested in talking to Myriam, or, I really want to talk to everybody about the details of this, but nobody wants to dig in that fast when you just like say hello on the street and you've never met them before. So I said I better call my friend Myriam. And they talk about staying on your side of the net. Mm-hmm. And what I realized recently is that I rarely, if ever, in my closest relationships where the people know me the best, AKA my partner, Matthew, I am always on his side of the net because nobody taught me the tools, right? So even
Can you break that down a little bit more, what that means to be on his side?
Yeah. So like they use the example of how, when you stopped me and you said, let's pay attention to our language, like language, your words, like by your word, you create your life, mm-hmm. Your language has meaning and power and affects you and affects the other. And when you stay on your side of the net, an example would be if you were upset about something, you would state the situation neutrally, like, I'm still really like learning about this, but I'll use somebody else's example. When the wife came home or the husband came home from work and read the newspaper and needed some time to unwind, and his partner needed to be heard because she was with little kids all day long, and he said and didn't pay attention to what she was saying or make eye contact with her, she felt dismissed and not heard and not cared for. But if that happened to me, I would be like, you're being a dick. Like, why aren't you listening? This is kind of important, or whatever, and that would be an extreme example of, I never really say that, but it's not like
that would be being on his side of the net.
Yeah, you go to that side of the net instead of taking responsibility for what's happening in your heart and mm-hmm. your body and your brain. And I realized that I am a child, and this is not all the time. I'm just saying when this happens, but I am childish in the sense that I want to always lash out because I didn't have the tools. So they give you 6 hallmarks of exceptional relationships. Like the first one is, to what extent can I be myself with you? The second one is, if I am myself with you, like truly who I am, then to what extent can I build conditions where you can be yourself? if I do that, if I do share myself, then can I trust that you won't use that against me? And I won't use that against you. Number 4 is you can be honest with each other, like truly honest. You don't have to hide. Can we tell each other the truth and not have to read between the lines? Which honestly, this has been lately something that has felt so exhausting to me in my interactions with people, is just always feeling like you can't trust the other person's words and they don't know if they can trust yours. You deal with conflict productively, and
Mhm.
that dealing with conflict productively is also very interesting, and I want to talk about that with you too, because dealing with conflict productively implies that you actually allow for conflict to arise.
Mhm.
And this is the crux of why I wanted to unpack this particular podcast with you, Myriam, is that and because we, if people knew our background, would know how safe we feel with each other, because we've had some pretty hilarious conflicts, and like
I was gonna.
uh, but the thing is that in those moments, like when that was happening, it felt scary and dangerous. But then when like they talk about like how in relationship you have to decide to take a risk, and then the risk will yield reward. And for me, when it comes to you, the risk of having those conflicts over the years resulted in what feels to me like a super lifelong friendship that won't die.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that doesn't seem to be the case in, like, I think like right now during this like pandemic and stuff, and like where people feel there's this heightened sense of fear that I find that
Mhm.
and I think we're getting used to feeling that. That's the
Mhm.
thing that is why these conversations like with you are really important to me, because I have the impression that we're getting very, very used to staying on the surface and
Yeah.
not even ever having the opportunity for a conflict to arise. Hey, how you doing? Fine. How's the weather? Everything's great, or everything's, you just stay in these like rote interactions. So that's number 5. You deal with conflict productively. You're going to disagree, and then it's a matter of how you do
Mhm.
it. And then number 6 was like, the number 5 I wanted to stay with for a second, because you deal with conflict productively. We're going to disagree. That's a given, right?
Yeah.
And that's scary. That's
Mhm.
always been scary for me. Can we raise that conflict and not sweep it under the rug, which that's something that feels really natural in all of the interactions that I'm having most recently. I'm not that in the past few years. And then can we resolve it so that the relationship further strengthens and grows, so that you take the risk, it feels kind of dangerous at the time, but then that builds into something, you reap the rewards from that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then the 6th one is, can we be committed to each other's growth, and then maybe raise the difficult issues because we care for the other, and then we believe that the other can be better than they are. So 5 and 6, in my viewpoint, like why I love having these conversations over Zoom with people from all over the world in the Footnote program, is that they don't those though that doesn't seem to be my natural way of living, in unless I go to the jungle where there's like clusters of people that are like doing the work. But I want to live with everyone,
Mhm.
embrace all, exclude none. I don't just want to be with my kind, you know?
Sure. Sure. You bring up so many good points in sharing the list. Thank you for doing that. It's super helpful to be able to sort of have a diving off point. Also, I'm also just want to acknowledge that I'm taking notes because I have the OLD, which is I'm getting older, and so I don't remember everything all the time. So as you're speaking, I'm taking notes so I remember what to say, so I can really listen to be attentive to what you're saying, and not think about something else. So the first, what I want to share, which is super exciting, all of these points that once I've learned and grown into learning them and really embody them, is how freeing they can be, right? Because when you were talking a little bit about sort of childish behavior, responding from a childish place, that goes back to understanding our brain and how our brain functions, right? And so and want to reflect back to you, right, that there's this protective part, our limbic brain that just always has stepped in, has sort of led. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong speaking for you, but just in conversations that we've had, there's ways in which we both can lead from that place when we're feeling threatened or whatnot, which is a natural physiological response. And so our work is to step in between that and say, oh, okay, I understand that you think that that's a bear that's going to kill me, but in fact, it's my husband and he just didn't put the dishes in the dishwasher. So we can kind of talk this thing out. But that's one. And then the second thing, and I sort of did it backwards. I didn't learn it that way. What I got really, really good at is repair, because I repair all the time. And once I realized like, oh, this is really where it's at, it's like, and repair looks different for everybody. For me, it started out looking like apologizing, right? And I don't come from a background or a family that has almost ever done that ever, in situations, whether they were wrong or inappropriate or whatnot. And so to be able to take those steps to be able to go to my partner, at first it would probably be maybe a month after, and then it came down to 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And now it's within the hour. I recognize that, ooh, that came from a different place. That came from a perception I had, right? Or that came from an expectation or a belief that I have that isn't necessarily in alignment with what is happening here. And so I do the repair work, which coincides with what they're saying, which is, being responsible for myself, then being able to go to him and say, and feel safe that I can say, hey, I'm really sorry about that. And recognizing that just as important as it is for conflict to arise and for love to be there and for safety and courage, it's just as important to recognize that the repair really serves a really strong purpose in creating trust, right? And making it sort of a leveling, like we're both on our sides of the court and each person can take responsibility. But that piece oftentimes is another place where we don't have tools for that, right? It just feels so scary to go in and say, for me, it has. And I want to clarify also that I'm speaking from my own experience, that it feels terrifying. And even with my siblings now and my family of origin, I recognize, even though I can do it with my partner and my son, I'm not great at doing it with my family because I don't know how they'll react. I don't know if they're going to, all those other thoughts are still running through, like my expectations of what if they say this, what if they say that? And I'm not on my side of the court, right? I'm always worried about what they're, when you're repairing. And the reason it's so vital is because you're building those muscles to recognize this A does not necessarily always mean B, right? You're saying that the expectations and the beliefs and the perceptions aren't always where you want to lead from, right? Some of that comes from a really old place. The other thing I wanted to, yes.
Before you go on though, can we just stop for examples here? Because there's a couple things that occur to me when you're saying that about repair and apologizing. And that is that it's hard to, well, when you recognize, the tennis court analogy gave me a really good indicator, like how I could actually have tangible tool, and the way that they describe, like you're on your side of the net when you say, I feel this way, and you just always try to keep the other person out of it. You just say how you feel. But what I realized over the years is that I don't always want to have to be apologizing. So that like the growth, so that like there's a point of diminishing returns where you start to then, this happens for me from my experience, is that if I always am feeling like I'm having to apologize and then do the repair work, then I start to elevate the other human, right? Whether it's the mother or the husband or the partner, and then you start to feel diminished and deflated, like you can't get it right. So I guess the growth happens when you recognize the behavior. When I recognize the behavior and I start to let the neurons that wire together fire together to make the actual change in the behavior, and now I'm at the point where, because like, and also to be on the other side, like I don't always, let's just flip it. For me, like I realized that there was a phase where there was so much like analysis happening in the brain, where there was like maybe less actual living out the experience of life, and analysis was happening. And then like I was imagining like how it must not feel great to always be on the other side of getting the apology, giving the apology, getting the apology, the receiver of the apology. That's also,
well, I want to clarify, and I thank
yeah,
you for bringing that to my attention, because I apology is not how I would define repair.
okay.
So that was I spoke out of turn in that. I mean, I spoke in error saying that. In some instances it is, but in most instances for me, it's really about taking responsibility to the way that I reacted about something, or to the way that I approached something. And so,
Can you give an example?
yes, I certainly can. Uh, let me just click through my mind of 10,000 things. Okay, so I just had an incident this morning happen where I was having a conversation. I was preparing to have a conversation with my partner, and he wasn't home. And so I do what I often do, which is sort of run it through my head before. And then I thought, oh, this doesn't really feel authentic if I'm just sort of planning it out. And I thought, well, what's that about? Why am I feeling the need to have to pre-talk the talk, or a talk? And I realized, oh, it's because I'm afraid of what his response might be, right? So right away, I'm like, oh, I already have an expectation of what he's going to say. So I'm not coming from a place of just pure, genuine, letting him be how he's going to be. So I really come back into self. I do a little bit of breathing, and he comes home, and I'm very tender. I can tell already. I'm not tender, but I'm sort of waiting, right? Waiting to see if is he going to say how I want him to say? And he doesn't, right? He responds how he's going to respond, which is appropriate for him, right? And I just sat in observance of my reaction, right, for a second. And how I know I've gone off I've diverted from the path is when he says, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Fine." Right. And I think, oh, Mayday, Mayday, man down, or woman down, right? And so I realized, oh, I have now started to spin in a different direction, because I was scared of his response. I created an expectation of what it would be. And that fear sort of just created a lot of noise in my head. So when he said, are you fine? And I thought, he said, are you okay? And I said, yeah, I'm fine. And then I said, I'm just going to get up for a second, which I've been also doing to tend to myself. I'm going to just go tend to myself for a second. So I got up, and my instinct was to run out through the living room, through the kitchen, out the back door, around the house, out to the street, and
to Alabama,
yeah,
to my house,
to your house, to Boston, right? In my pajamas. Oh, I just gotta say no. And I stopped myself, and I went in the bathroom, and I got in the bathroom, and I closed the door, and I thought, and that was my repair, right? It was like, oh, hey, let's stop in our tracks for a second. What's actually happening here? And it's still noisy in my head. It's not like it's this streamlined thought, well, what happened was da da da. It's right. Like, it's a lot of that conversation, but then I'm able to say, okay, I think this is what I was afraid of what happened. And now that it has happened, how do I proceed from there, right? Mm-hmm. So there was a couple things happening. One is that I was able to calm myself down and say, you know what? I'm perceiving it to be a certain kind of way. This is the person that he is. This is how he responds. He's not effusive about things. So Can that be okay? Yes, it can be okay. Okay. Can I still feel good about the choices that I made and what I've done? Yes, it can. And then the repair is to go back in, and I don't necessarily even have to say anything to him, but I can just come back in, and I can just sit with him, and I have calmed myself down. I've processed it through. I mean, believe me, the squatters and, the board of directors and the minions that live inside me are still fighting their battle. They're like, but I'm in a solid place where I'm realizing, oh, what I needed was to just go in and repair that little sort of rip that happened, right? Come back in and come back. Then there are other times where I'm doing homework with my son, and we do 5 math problems, and he does them all perfectly. And then we get to number 6, and he's like, I don't remember how to do this. And we've just done 5. And and that repair looks like, wow, mom really lost her shit. And I it is not okay for me to talk to you that way. It is not okay for me to react. What would have been a better response was if I said, you know what, let's take a breather for 10 minutes because I'm about to lose my shit. And then you would feel safe. And then you would know that sometimes I get frustrated when I feel like you don't, or I'm not helping you the right way. And I said, and a lot of that comes from my own self. I don't know if I'm teaching you right. I'm not a teacher and all the things. And then I say, can you forgive me? Instead of I'm sorry. It's like, I will say I'm sorry. And then I don't just leave it at I'm sorry. I say, I apologize for that. Will you forgive me? And then he says, maybe. So, so
Oh my gosh, those examples are so helpful, right? The first one I love because I think that we don't always have to go back to the person,
sure,
and that doesn't always have to be a closure and an interaction with the person. Like
sure,
you illustrated that, how we can just tend to the repair within ourselves. I mean, those examples are just so good about like how you start to self-regulate and you have enough self-awareness where you can say like, does this actually need to have an outright communication with another person that's also going to take up their, I don't know exactly how to say it, but it's like
it's like emotional labor for them too. Right,
exactly. It's like
right,
their life force.
right.
How can we, and then with your son, like where how you can distinguish what needs to actually be talked through with the other person, right?
Sure.
So,
Well, one thing that you said, if we can circle back to, is it is diminishing, right? To always be the person apologizing,
mhm,
and that adds more to the cycle, right? I feel diminished, and then
mhm,
my self-esteem goes to shit. Then I start self-loathing, and then it's all the things. So
mhm.
there is a way in which repair, I think, has turned to feel really empowering for me, actually, because
Yes.
I think that I stand up to the sort of loud, strong forces or parts, I like to call them,
Mhm.
the parts within myself that are um, feeling the need to battle and be defensive
Yeah.
and protect me, right? And so
Yes.
I can stand up to them and say, hey, I got this. And
Mhm.
that's the adult coming in, right? That's the
Mhm.
sort of mature part that says, okay, I can recognize why that would feel scary to me, or I can recognize why
Mhm.
that might trigger a memory or something.
Mhm.
However, and that builds trust within yourself. So
Yes.
that's what's really, really important. The last
Yeah.
thing I wanted to say, in terms of the number 6 that you read was, um, if you wouldn't mind reading it again out loud.
Mhm. Yep. Um, can we be committed to the other's growth and
Mm,
maybe raise the difficult issues because we care for the other and we believe the other can be better than they are?
sure. So the point I wanted to make to that is what has been helpful for me in particularly the last 2 years, when I've been doing my own sort of work around race and identity, is really allowing for the idea, as uncomfortable as it is, that people will disappoint you, right?
Mhm.
And however, there's still a way in which there can be love and connection, right? I'm still sort of in the middle of that. I'm not fully clear on that piece, but I felt like that number 6 was helpful to hear, because it really invites me to hold a high vision for someone, instead of coming from the wounded place where it's like, oh my God, they said this or they think that, and it really wounded me. And I just stay in that place. Even my body, it's like this when I see the person or I'm looking down, where now I can feel like, take a breath and realize that that's a human condition, right? Is that I can still see the value, and I can still see through to the person's heart, even though a particular choice that they've made or something that they said or an action they've taken has disappointed me and wounded.
Mhm.
And that's been a really tough one to process with people that I feel really, really close to and have loved dearly for a long time, around race and
Mhm.
inclusivity and equality, and
Mhm.
realizing, oh, I mean, it's just such a bigger conversation, but that one in particular, where it's like, can I honor their growth, or just that they even have the possibility that there's growth, right? Not just
Mhm.
sort of leaving it there, like, oh, he said this, or being in conflict with my partner and thinking that's the end of the road, that's the deal breaker. It's like, that is disappointing. And I am really bummed that you think that way or that you thought that way, but also holding that potential, because that allows for me to hold that potential for myself. And that's what I'm
Mhm.
seeing is happening as I reflect that back to myself.
So I was thinking that maybe what a good I think I have this impression that this is going to lead to a lot of good conversations, um, and or like very insightful conversations about equality and race and the I think we're like good people to maybe start to embark on these conversations together. Like it's going to
Mhm.
be a big adventure. Scary. But I want to go to like Esther Perel and like kind of riff off of like why you wanted to talk about that, because I think then that leads right into My Grandmother's Hands, which is this book that you recommended to me, um, that talks about healing racialized trauma in our bodies and our hearts. And I think what I'd like to do is just hand it over to you with this idea that I heard on a podcast recently with Stephen Jenkinson, who's this amazing teacher out of Ottawa. He has the Orphan Wisdom School, and he is called the Grief Walker. And his notion is that it takes a very courageous act to stay in the middle of polarized and divided um,
Mm,
standpoints, whether that's like, are you vaccinated or not vaccinated, and the certainty with
mhm,
which we're dividing ourselves and being
mhm.
encouraged to be divided, or race. These are very big intertwined and married,
Sure. Everything,
um,
identity,
yeah,
sexuality. Yeah.
all of it, right? So I've been really honing in on this idea of how detail oriented you have to be in the middle and stand in uncertainty, which is my goal. Because I can't see, I'm uncertain, I'm more uncertain than I've ever been about anything in my whole life. And there's freedom and also like fear, and like this fear that comes from standing there and like, you're always asked to maybe take a stand psychologically or something, like, see, there's pulls in lots of
Mm,
directions, and I have always refused that. That's been something that I've just never felt quite comfortable being all in or all out on any idea or any sweeping generalization. So I wanted to, when I listened to Esther Perel and Dr. Chatterjee talking about being in relationship, these conversations that I'm hearing on the internet are giving me such hope, I guess.
mm,
Like, it just feels so good to hear voices of reason, like Esther Perel talking about like how, because it's so hard. I mean, the self-love and all these ideas about like, I don't know how to, I've been practicing whatever the self-love is for so long. Like, I have to go look up the dictionary, like, what is the definition of love again? What is compassion? What is self-care?
mhm.
Because we use all these so much that like I just get bogged down with like, what the F? I just want to go play, run
Right,
and
right,
dance.
right, right.
So I wanted to go to Esther Perel and then go right into My Grandmother's Hands, and maybe we can do like a couple of exercises. Maybe before we go to Esther Perel, we do the exercises that were recommended in the Connect video or the Connect podcast, where at the end they talk about the solution, right? So like I guess like in our conversations, what I'm hoping for towards the end is like the possibility of hope and like um, getting out of like our heads and into like this idea of like living in our bodies, and what
Mm,
are the exercises of hope.
mm,
So I really loved when they talked about how in the middle of this pandemic we spend so much time on our digital devices, right? So she was saying like how we want to connect with people is in person is the best, right? So you can not only hear the words, but you feel the tone in the room, you see the
language
gestures
of
and
the
the
body.
nuances, the body language.
Sure.
So that's the most ideal, but we don't get to do that very often. So the next best thing is maybe Zoom. And they talked about the benefits of actually being on Zoom over the telephone, because you can see each other and then you're sort of forced to get beyond the what's going on, like, how are you, how's the weather, you actually are sharing yourself maybe a little more, and intentionally, talking about the way in which I miss you,
Mhm.
or the things that you're celebrating, or the things that you're grieving. And so you get to, you have like that focused concentration to share that on Zoom. The worst are communicating through texts and emails, because you lose all of those real human connections.
Right. And the
So
nuances and the essence of, yeah.
yeah, so they recommended, and I thought maybe you and I could do this right now just for fun,
Okay.
that you do this exercise where you start the meeting, like, let's say you're meeting with the crew of your coaching staff or something, or you're going to an event, because you start the meeting with 90 seconds timed, and you make two statements, and they have to include three feeling words. And so they give the example like this: if you really knew me, you would know that I'm moving. And that makes me feel terrified, because I've lived in this house for 40 years and I'm going to a new place that I don't know. And I have no idea what I'm going to do with all this furniture,
Mm.
or something along those lines. So and then they time each person. And her point was that people were saying it takes a lot of time to share like how you really are, but the truth is that it doesn't. You can get to know somebody in the same amount of time as you would say, hi, how are you? Fine, I'm good. And you? So you want to try it?
Sure. Can I just add to that?
Oh
So
Lord.
I want to just say real quickly that I have a client that I've been working with, and first of all, I run circles for women, and part of how I do that is with a very intentional framework, right? Which is really around that, because my whole purpose in running them is because I know all these really amazing women who don't know they're amazing. And so we come together in a room and everybody gets to tell each other how amazing they are. However, they don't know each other. So, and I use this term because I'm really working at seeing things through a Black lens. Okay. So in white supremacist culture, there's very specific characteristics that happen when groups come together, right? It's sort of like, let's say, imagine a board meeting. Everyone comes into the room. There's a very specific agenda. No one knows how anybody's doing. This person's mother just died. This one just had a baby. This one, this, no one. And so everyone comes to the table and are supposed to come present in a very specific kind of way, right? That's white supremacist characteristics in terms of organizationally, we don't, there's no connection really. It's just about come in and do the work. And so what I've been trying to do through my own lens and Black lens is remembering that we are community, we are together, we belong to one another. What's happening to you is happening to me in a different kind of a way. And so when I come together with my groups, I always start off with, because people are coming from soccer practice, making dinner, school, all the things. So we start off with just a minute or two of breathing, right? And always a beautiful question. How have you nourished yourself today? What has felt really hard today? What are you holding sacred this week? Those sorts of things. And it just, I mean, it's like nosedive right to the heart, right? Just right into the connection. Anyway, so I tell you that because that's sort of how I start. And then I either move into a poem or I do meditation. We do a poem and a meditation. So that's sort of,
Okay,
I have a very specific
so
framework.
let's switch then. Let's not do theirs, let's do yours.
Okay. Okay. So I was going to do mine at the ending, but I just want to tell you this one particular example because I'm working with a board of folks that are in the Midwest who are wanting help because they don't have any people of color on their board. And that is not in the ethos of their organization. That's their demographic is people of color. So to not have any people on the board, it's really a conflict. So one of the things that we've been talking about is this idea of belonging, right? Well, and they're like, well, we're really nice to people. What does this mean? Why don't Black people want to come here? We're brown people. And so I'm working with them to try and sort of peel away some of the characteristics that we're conditioned to believe is how we do things, right?
Okay.
And what's becoming more apparent in our society is that the hard skills of like analytics and computer design and this and that, while those are really valuable in some industry and marketplace, the soft skills are what are keeping people alive, literally, right? particularly in COVID, when people couldn't be in the same space and just have energy from other people. What's keeping people alive with these soft skills of connecting and having interpersonal communication and doing things in a different kind of way. So I recently met with them, and we decided to do, and they're just, so they've attracted some new board members. And so now I'm working with them through the process of kind of integrating the new folks, and it's all different. It's a very diverse group now. It's just very mixed, I should say. And so the call, when we start on the call, I collaborate with someone else. And when we start, and my co-partner is white, and I only say that because there's definitely a level of comfort with her than there would be if it was just me, right? So she kind of comes in and she does this sort of talk, and we have a dance that we do, and she does this sort of talk where everybody feels comfortable, and then I come right in with the poem, and people are like, I thought this was a board meeting. Are you going to sing Kumbaya next? Are we going to sit around the fire? And I'm like, no, this is like, what I'm trying to get you to do is we're trying to create a salvo for the organization, some community agreements or some aspirations that they can determine how they want to interact as a group. And yeah, that can be on a PowerPoint, but it can also be talking, like you're saying, right? And we can't be in the same room. Everybody's all over the world. So what are the things that connect us, right? What are the ways in which what are the things that we share? What is the common thread that can go around the group? Words, music, light, creativity. And so we have to bring those parts in, but it is so uncomfortable for people initially, but nothing's being asked of you except to allow for that, right? And then it really changes the whole tone of everything. When you can come from a place where, and the poem or the meditation may not resonate with everyone, but it'll resonate with about 80% of the group, which then means that 80% of the energy shifts, right? And everyone starts from a place of truth and seeing and hearing one another, because they have had reflected back to them, whether it's in words or meditation, where they are in that moment. So I'm going to read this poem that I picked. And typically how I start a meeting is I would just kind of ask everybody to just, get really grounded, come to a place of stillness, right?
Let's actually do it.
I know, I'm asking you to do it right now.
Okay. Okay, wait. I'll be back in an hour. No,
okay,
no, I love
and
this.
The other thing I want to say to you is that, and this is so fun talking because of the different points and the way that we talk. I feel like our conversations look like constellations. It's like, ding, 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 or ping pong machine. But I want to say to you that when you said that there are a lot of good things going to come out of these conversations, it's true. And then you said you were scared. And I want to say to you to witness that and say to you that I am scared too. I also feel really strongly that it is possible to have these conversations with curiosity and joy, right? And the fear sometimes comes from an expectations that we should know everything, right? And that's not the case. One, we're friends, we love each other, and we're always learning. And two, we've stated out loud that we're committed to that learning, right? And that we belong to each other. And so it's really about curiosity. And the third thing I like to say in my calls is that it's not really a safe space. It's more of a resilient space, right? So
Absolutely.
It's like, I'm going to say something wrong. You're going to say something right, back and forth, but the connection remains because I see the good in you, you see the good in me, and we see the intention. So,
well, before you go on though, that comes back to what that we were talking about from David and Carol's book, Connect, right? Is that you have to take a risk for there to be a reward. And safety is overrated. Like the whole point is to take calculated risks and to go into the danger zone a little bit so that you can have some tools for something to compare to so that you can grow.
Right. And it's like David White says, the poet David White will say, when you come to the edge, right, life will rise up to meet you. And that's the risk. When you come to the edge of what it is, or what it is that you believe, and suddenly you're being challenged or whatnot, that's the edge. And life will rise up to meet you, and it will unfurl in a way that is resilient and that you will grow from, whether you say, well, that's fucked up and I don't believe that at all, and I'm going to walk away. That's a choice too. We all have agency, but it can also say, oh, okay, well, I can have my thought, she can have hers, and we can disagree. And I know she's wrong, but we're still here,
Yeah,
right? And that's
right.
growth too.
That's right. And the fear, when I talk about my fear, it's just so it's not living in the body, right? So like
right.
you acknowledge those things, then it doesn't like take up residency in your belly or your
Right.
shoulder. And then recognizing that on the other side of fear, once you go for it, is courage. And then from that is a little bit more freedom. And now that's what I'm addicted to, is the feeling of relief and freedom. And so that is the thing that drives me to do the things that I'm scared to do, which is like, I don't want to have superficial conversations anymore. When not that I don't want to have fun, because I do. And this is fucking fun, in its own weird way. Growth and courage and having freedom just helps to expand our whole entire community's resiliency. So let's do it. Let's go. Let's go.
Okay, so I will ask you first, I will look into the screen because unfortunately I have yet to have a meeting with my circle as a person, but I do really like to look into the screen, and I like to look at everybody in the eye and in the face, so that really what I want from this experience is for everyone to, and I think all of us do, is to be seen and heard, right? And so I just acknowledge that I really, really see you. I'm so happy you're here. And it's a privilege, right? So I will ask you to just take a minute to, however it feels okay for you, to transition from wherever you came from to where we are here now together. And take a deep breath if you'd like, feel your feet on the ground if you'd like, touch your face if you'd like. But the key is to make contact with yourself so that you are here and present. And dinner will get made and the laundry will wait.
Who's making my dinner?
We're going to call in a delivery. And just allow for yourself to really feel and embody this notion that you are making time for yourself right now, which is your body is very thankful for, as are we all, to have you here. The next thing I usually would do, we'll just kind of start with a short meditation, which I will invite you to, and I won't go through a long one because I don't have one, my script here, but just invite you to maybe close your eyes if that fits for you, and put your hand on your heart or your belly. And I do that because it's important for us to grow into our learning about breathing, right? And also connect with the parts of us that are working independently in our body, that are always there, no matter how judgy or the thinking ways that we have. But just to know that we're okay. Your heart's beating as it should. You're breathing. You're caring for yourself, always, always. And I will ask you to do 3 breaths, which you will breathe in for 4, the count of 4, hold for the count of 4, and then exhale very slowly to the count of 6. I'll ask you to do that 3 times. And then whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes and I'll read you a poem. This is one of my favorite poets, Donna Faulds. This poem is called Allow. There is no controlling life. Try corralling a lightning bolt containing a tornado. Dam a stream and it will create a new channel. Resist and the tide will sweep you off your feet. Allow and grace will carry you to higher ground. The only safety lies in letting it all in. The only safety lies in letting it all in. The wild and the weak, fear, fantasies, failures, and success. When loss rips off the doors of your heart, or sadness veils your vision with despair, practice becomes simply bearing the truth. In the choice to let go of your known way of being, the whole world is revealed to your new eyes.
What does that mean?
You tell me? The poem is called Allow.
I better read it again. That'll be for the beginning of the next one.
Okay. I think that it's just sort of what we're talking about here, which is allowing the conversation, right? Allowing the fears, allowing the curiosity. All of that leads us to a different perspective, right? So we could both prepare for this conversation as much as we wanted to, but just by allowing it, it's unfolding as it should. And I have gained new insights, which means I will leave this conversation seeing things in a little bit different way.
Yeah.
Because I've allowed for that to be.
Yeah, for sure.
So this idea of connecting, right? So there's so many different ways around this, but going back to the Connect book, I wanted to share an experience I had, which was years ago. And I remember it so distinctly, that I was in a disagreement with my partner, my husband, boyfriend at the time. And we were just sort of both angry, and I was raising my voice, and he came over to sit next to me, and he put his hand on my hand. And I quickly, as fast as I could, removed it because we were fighting. And I was like, you don't touch when you're fighting. There's no kindness in fighting. Like, you stay on that side and I stay on this side. And he said, we're still on the same team, right? So it's like, we're still both playing tennis. We're still playing this game. It's just, we're having a difference of opinion of if that ball was in or if that ball was out, right? And I think that those sort of skills and tools, which I really appreciate that we refer to them as that, right? Because there's a way that it can feel defeating or deflating. You can feel deflated because I don't have a knowing around how to do certain things. When the reality is these are all skills. They're all tools. Yes, they resonate with me because I want to walk on this planet in that way, but it's not a school. Like I really, I don't understand the periodic chemistry table, right? But that's a skill, that's a tool that can help you in your life. It's just not one I need or want. But these skills or tools, it's been so valuable for me to think about them in that way, where it's like, oh, this is something that I've learned. I now have this resource. I can put it in my resource box and pull it out when I need it. But these skills in which we are saying what you were saying, I wanted to go back to, which is sort of standing in this place of allowing for all of this to be happening around you, right? And feeling like you feel more confused now than you ever have been in your life. And I think about you and I look at you and I think about how the last 12 years of choices that you have made in your life have actually prepared you for this exact moment. Of course, it's like imagine that you're a seaman, right? And you have spent years sailing on the sea, years and years and years, and suddenly you're on the ship and you're out in the middle of the ocean and the waves are 60 feet, right? And it's like everything that you have, every time you've gotten on a boat has prepared you for that exact moment. Of course you feel shaken and you feel scared and whatnot, but you know that within you, the choice that you made to eat a certain way or to take care of yourself a certain way or to rest as an act of resistance or to celebrate or to love people and to express has prepared you for this exact moment. All the things that are happening around you are going to dislodge and shift your own soul furniture inside, move things around a little bit, but you're ready, right?
Yes,
And so
indeed.
it's like we just don't know. And I feel like I was just saying this to my husband this morning. I was saying that years ago I was having a conversation with Maddie, with your partner, and we were talking about nutrition and food and diet, and he said, I think I've told you this before. I told him, and he was like, I don't remember saying that, but he said, he said, Myriam, food, the way that you eat is supposed to nourish you in a way that makes your life better.
Mhm.
And I remember thinking, yeah, that's why I love French fries, because my life is so, or whatever the thing was that I was.
Mhm.
And he said it to me, and I remember thinking to myself, I filed it away
Mhm.
until the day that I could really understand, it was really embodied in me, that I could really
Mhm.
understand what it was embedded. It was not like, at the time, if it felt really ambiguous, but now it feels like implicit. Like I'm very clear about exactly what he means when he said that.
Yeah.
Right? And
Well,
all of this has sort of prepared for this moment, right?
mhm. Yeah, like I don't even think I think I wanted to say this when we were talking earlier about the notion of and the word health, right?
Hmm.
That it's so um the word has been like disintegrated so much
Hmm.
that and has been kind of hijacked by
Right.
by whatever marketing or
Yeah.
whatever
Marketing.
or
Yeah.
everybody or what everybody's ideas are about health in the most in the way that is like not the most nourishing for us, right?
Right.
Diet, how we look,
So
whatever
if I
the
can,
thing
let me
is.
just, if I may, just sorry, but I want to ask you, if I said to you, if I said, okay, you can never use the word health again, what is a word that you would put in the place?
Right, that's what I was getting at. So I realize that this has been on my mind a lot, and it has to do with what you were talking about with food, right? Which is that it's a higher quality of life. Like we don't get 10 hours of sleep, or 8 hours of sleep or whatever is nourishing for each individual, and eat the kinds of foods that are wholesome and good for us. Move in the way that is most natural, so that our bodies work and function without pain. Take care of our spiritual, emotional, and mental health. Be in community. We're not practicing these so that we could, for me personally, I'm not practicing this so I could live to be a ripe old age, though that would be nice. I'm doing these things because it improves the quality of my life right now.
Right.
Everything feels better right now. And that's what I mean. So I think exchanging the a high quality of living,
Hmm.
which is like a few words, um, quality of life
Hmm.
in exchange for the word health. Like
Hmm.
that's what I have been doing, because health
Hmm.
is just sounds like it's like a naughty word now to me. Like I just
Hmm.
don't want to talk about health with anyone, because it's always misconstrued, and you have to sift through a lot of misunderstanding of culture and
Right.
what each person believes about what is health to do that.
And the other thing is,
So
it's a trigger word now, right? So there's something, I
exactly.
think about my beloved father in love, and I think about, okay, you really want to eat that Arby's, or let's say you really want to eat that whatever twink, whatever the think product is. It's not healthy, right? It just, and
Mhm.
then anytime I come to the table with something that he'll say, he categorizes it and says, oh, that's healthy. Oh, that's
Yeah,
healthy. Oh, I don't want that. That's healthy, which is connected to negative, right? And
right.
so there goes the whole thing.
Mhm.
From my word, I listened to this woman talk, and she said something that I thought was, that I actually have written up on a board. Jen Sincero, I think is her name, a writer, and she said that she was talking about abundance and wealth, and she said, wealth is not necessarily, it's not necessarily created to connected to greed, right? It's a connection to wanting a deeper life,
Mhm.
to deepening your life, right? And so
Yes.
that, and for me, I think I would switch the word health for right now, and it will evolve, I'm sure, but for peace, right? And
Mm,
I'm
mhm.
talking peace
Mm,
within. For some time, it was, I would switch it for, the last few years, it was being safe in my own care, right? It's
mhm.
changed
Mhm.
health to being safe in my own care. I'm not abusing my body in a way that creates more self-loathing, which
Sure,
does
sure.
not feel safe in my own. So now it feels like just peace. I just feel sort of
At ease. Yeah.
right. And
Yeah.
that um feels healthy
Yeah.
to me.
And it's such a shame. I mean, food, I think we're probably going to have a whole conversation just about food, because we have really denigrated our lifetimes, like our
Mm,
lifestyles around food
mm,
without, I like, I just even have stopped, um, I don't even like eat with people that much anymore. And
mm,
like going to the table is something that has been dismantled, and sharing food, and like big pasta dinners,
mhm.
nobody wants to eat the pasta anymore, when like
Right.
back in the day, like Sundays were meant for like spaghetti and
Mm,
meatballs,
mhm.
and then like how that nourishes the soul in a way. So let's have a whole podcast about food and our
Right, and
backgrounds and
I mean, but this is an interesting idea that you're talking about too, is really changing the language, right? Like
yeah,
not
yeah,
using,
yeah.
like not talking about diet and food and you know, money and those sorts of sex, like all the things where it's really about nourishment, right? And how is it
Mhm,
that I'm feeding myself? And that's a lot of things. It's what I'm reading, what I'm listening
mhm,
to, what I'm putting in my body, all those things. So I think that that would be, yeah, that would be really a great conversation. And the other thing, when you touched upon the Sunday dinners with family, it comes back to this idea of belonging, right?
yeah.
That's people are coming for Nana's meatballs, but they're also coming for this sense of belonging, this sense of
Mhm,
being together, being belonging to one another. Or you go to a park every Sunday and you meet your family for a picnic. It's
yeah,
belonging to nature. These are the
yes.
terms that we are so far from, that we
Mhm,
are being invited to come back to, particularly as a foot nerd, where I think everyone in their own way says, this is a priority for me.
mhm,
And I honor how you choose to live and celebrate that.
mhm,
And in that we come together as a
mhm.
community. So
Okay, so for the last segment of our time together, I want to talk about. I want you to introduce my grandmother's hands and the
I
conversation. Wait. Let me finish. And I just want to close because I think this is such an important um, rabbit hole to not rabbit hole, but I think this is a vast conversation that is important, and it encompasses all of the things that we have been talking about, and it's kind of the in my hope is that this is like the pinnacle of what we get to about connection. And the term that I heard today that I want that I is just been sticking with me is sacred hospitality. And that is, you talked about confusion, and I think that standing in the middle and attending to the details of all the perspectives and making personal choices, and, and including everyone, excluding none, is the idea of sacred hospitality. And so however you want to take the conversation, but I do want to, we have in the TFC audio project, we have a few conversations with Nick and one of our other foot nerds, Ashley Harper, and they started to address. There's a few episodes called Black and White, and so I think that when you talk about like addressing, we're just having conversations of connection. So I want to go there next, and then and then we'll wrap up our conversation
um
with
I
with the idea that we're going to do it again.
I if I'm honest, I feel like we've it's a really big conversation. It's a really big
Yeah.
one for me. And I'm just not sure we have the time to go into it in a way
Hmm.
that I would feel um good about, because
Right.
it's so many different layers. But I am very interested in continuing the conversation. I think that I just it just feels really big to me. Just
It is big,
right.
but
Yeah.
can we, so we talked about having part two, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So, so we have, like, so let's just talk about the evolution of our texts, right?
Okay. Sure.
It started with connect, um, with David Bradford and Carol Robin. Then we went to Esther Perel, which was like interconnectedness and how we can't be who we are without being in relationship with another.
Hmm.
um, the same, and then like in relationship with another, we have all these tools that we can learn in order to stay on our side of the net in order to take, big risks in being together with one another, and not just in not just superficial ways. And let me be clear, like, there has been a part of my life, even in my own partnership, where I've been in together with one person for 20 years or something, in friendship and dating, and then in marriage, where there is the superficial, where we're interacting on a daily basis just in the superficial way. So this is not just in with our friends and families. These are we have to take risks in order to truly be in community. So those, and then the next, then the text kind of went like, here's this, what do you think about this? I want to unpack this podcast. And then you said, and then there's this one with Esther Perel. And then later comes, and gently, you've overlooked this one here, my grandmother's hands, which is, talking about race and how we handle this in our world as far as interconnectedness goes. And then here we are having this conversation today. So where does that fit in your vision?
Oh, okay. Where that fits in is self and bodies.
Okay.
Right. And I think that everything is connected, because the way in which I communicate with you, or I communicate with my partner, or I communicate with a police officer, or I communicate with another person of authority, or someone that's, a family friend or something, is all based on, from my own experience, is all based on what's happening inside my body. And what's happening inside my body is a result of unhealed trauma that I'm working to, and will spend probably, many more years learning more about and understanding. And then how that sets off a response in my brain, which then leads me to eat or drink in a way that doesn't nurture myself, which then leads to self-loathing, which then leads to me spewing venom at somebody or my partner or something when I'm afraid. And so the book, My Grandmother's Hands, has been very valuable to me in recognizing that a lot of what happens inside me that I thought was a broken part of me, is a result of the way my body has responded physiologically to things that have happened to me in the past, and continues to do that with either microaggressions, or when I'm called a certain, negative derogatory word or something, and what happens, or when I'm feeling fear about my partner leaving or abandoning. And then my response to that has been habitually not nourishing.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm trying to come to a place where I'm eliciting different tools, like breathing, like pausing, like taking a nap, like going outside by myself, and making other choices with the agency that I have, to recognize that my body is as it is as a result of some things, as a result of childhood trauma, that I'm just learning and understanding, and have the capacity to heal, right? And that affects how I am in communication with my partner, and how I am in a relationship with my partner, and how I let other people shape me, and how I shape other people, and the ripple effects of how I walk through the world. And so that's where I felt like it tied in, because I thought that, one of the questions that I've had for a long time, and I don't have the answer to yet, although I'm leaning towards yes, for myself, has been, can I be wounded and worthy? Right? Can I have broken parts? Parts is a term I use when I am talking about my own internal family systems, which is the work of a psychologist named Dick Schwartz, who talks about in our own, not our family of origin, but the parts that exist within us, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have wounded parts. And then at the same time, those are sort of younger parts, right? And then the adult part is like trying to make her way in the world, and starting a business, and being a mom, and being a good wife, and being a friend. And so they're not in alignment. There's not congruency there. So there's a lot of, discontent. And by really peeling away a lot of these layers and trying to understand, like, wait, what happened? What shaped me from a young age to then
Mhm.
have my communication style and my reactions and the way that I walk and am, um, be as they are.
Mhm.
And that's where I'm starting to determine that there's value in there. There's 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 a worthy person, and um, I can have both. So I guess today I'm saying yes, you can be wounded and worthy, um, and that so that book has been really monumental for me in exploring, recognizing not only parts within self and spirit and soul, but also recognizing that in other people, right? That everyone comes to the table with all of their own stuff, which we
Mhm.
all know. However, the way I react to you as a result of this and whatnot. And so just trying to have more um, patience with myself around that, and also to educate myself and to really hone my tools
Mhm.
around and my skills around that, so that I am there's more of a balance. I'm not trying to get rid of the younger self. I'm actually in a place of real gratitude for the ways in which she's protected me and brought me to where I am. Um, Yet there's a way that it's not necessarily, and we've talked about this before, where it's not necessarily appropriate for a 5-year-old to be in a conversation with a 50-year-old,
Mhm.
and trying to have more congruence in my life, so that I'm trusting self, and things are coming from a place of self.
Mhm. So when I was listening to the interview with the author of My Grandmother's Hands, he describes it like a workbook, right? So he was having an interview with, I forget what her name is, but essentially it was kind of like, well, a group of, like, say, like white women who are trying to learn about healing racialized trauma should take this book and not just read it, right? Like, it's not an intellectual act. It's
Sure.
an act of like embodiment. And then
Mhm.
you treat it like exercises. So I was going to get my hands on the book and then read it myself. Um, and that's my intention, but I don't have a group of other white women to read it with. So,
I mean, look, this is feeling hard for me now. I'm gonna be
okay.
totally honest, because
Oh no.
no, you don't have to stop.
No, no, you froze right at that moment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
This is feeling hard for me now because this is a really fucking big deal.
Yeah, I know.
It's not like it's
Well,
I don't know how to explain it to people, in the sense that, like, it's
yeah,
not it's not a conversation, right?
I know, but you recommended the book to me. So
Right,
I'm
I did
asking you what
recommend
I
the
do
book to
with it.
you, but I also feel like, I don't want to, I just feel like I wanna give it more time, and I'm feeling
Okay.
like I'm kind of trying to get everything said in a certain amount of time, but I think it's just much bigger than that. So I feel
Okay.
like if we could just, yeah, table that for the next one. Um,
Okay.
yeah, and I think, and the other part I think is that, in terms of reading the book, I think what I'm finding actually with a lot of books right now is I actually pick up a book and I open it to a page and I start reading it, and I'm really trusting that the universe is like giving me what I need in that one moment. It might not be the book to read from beginning to end for you right now, right? It could
Okay.
be that we have a conversation and you're like, what the fuck? She mean it by that, whatnot. And then you go in.
Hmm.
It's like that sort of a book for me. It's like
Hmm.
sort of this resource. It's like some of the Eckhart Tolle stuff, like some of it, yes, and then other parts of it, no. Or if I'm reading a book of poetry, some of it just resonates right then. And I think
Hmm.
that that's the truth about this book,
Okay.
for me, where it's uh, like there's a set, there's a full section on police officers, right? And it's really helpful to reread that again and again and again when I'm triggered by violence like that comes up on the internet, right? It's like
Hmm.
helping me in that place, because like the same thing why I rely so much on poetry is that there's so many times in which I can't articulate what is happening here. And
Okay.
so when you're able to read it in someone's word, that you're like, yes, that's what's happened. It doesn't necessarily make it better, or I don't feel better having read it, but it's articulated in a way. And I think that we share a lot of, we've had these conversations before and we can share, but this conversation, to me, conversations around race are ones in which I'm trying to think of it, where like it feels like I think we can have the conversation, as I said, with joy and curiosity. It for me, as how I'm receiving, being welcome to share about this, it feels like you're going to get off the phone and we're going to get off this call, and then I'm going to be sort of left alone with what we
Right.
brought up. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah,
So
and I will say that it's not in my nature to have conversations about hard things. Like, I'm a kinesthetic person, and so this isn't in my nature at all. Like, I would definitely do my I read things that people recommend to me, and if it resonates with me at the time, I trust that it does, and if it doesn't, then there's maybe another time, just like you mentioned with Eckhart Tolle. But it's not even really in my makeup to approach a conversation like this at all. So I'm just trusting that you'll lead where you want to go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think it's important that this part of our conversation is recorded, because I want to be able to feel the discomfort that I'm feeling. I want to also, it's really important that I'm able to share it with you, right? Like, oh, this
Yeah.
is going to feel a certain kind of way, because if not, what I would do is, I don't know if other people would do it, but I would probably internalize that and start thinking all these things like, oh, and the internalization turns into like a loathing, right? Like, I'm bad because I'm Black and I got sensitive and whatnot. And so I'm wanting you to witness that that this is like, this is like really truthful. And I'm saying to you, like, oh, I'm kind of squirming in my seat, because what I really want to do is, it's like you're asking me, just from the work that I'm doing right now, it hasn't always been that way, but right now this work feels like very it's obviously very personal, but it just feels like I'm just holding it like so gently. And I can only share with when I'm feeling held, and I am feeling held, but I also know that it's like opening something inside me that then we're going to end in a short bit, and I will not have gotten what I needed in order to move through the rest of my day. So
And to be like, to honor what you're saying too, is that like, we're going into a conversation that if one of us in the past has needed to be heard and be held, the other person is in a position of like, okay, I'm going to hold this space for you, and I'm going to be that, but we're both going in kind of vulnerable, so that like we're not going to get to be that for each other. Like, I have the same, like, I
who's
just
going to
feel
catch
that
us?
I don't know, some foot nerds, I
Again,
hope.
with the Mayday.
Yeah, women down, 2 women down.
No, I really appreciate it, because I really felt viscerally a wave coming through my body. I started feeling hot on my toes and all the way coming up, because I also have my own expectations of myself as a Black woman, that I should know everything, and I should have a certain way of being. I'm really working towards moving away from that. And because we're friends, we know each other, I can be honest about that, and I can say that this is a new forum for me, right? Talking about this in a way that's just in conversation. So I'm also learning too. And I'm learning that I just learned that I need more time to be able to talk about something that feels this important to me. And so, but I'm also learning that I can say that to you, and that you're like, okay, right? And that you're not going to be mad, or you're not going to be all of the things, because that's what happens with us if we're not communicating.
Yeah. And actually it's so interesting, because it took like 90 minutes to get to the real thing. I mean, not that the conversation that we were having before wasn't valuable, but there was a sense of, there is a sense, a little bit of like, you always knowing that you're recording a conversation that's going to be public, is really brave. And then like the fact that we didn't stop the recording when it got uncomfortable means that the most the biggest gem, which maybe nobody will even get to because they'll be like, that is so boring. I don't want to hear about that. And then the good stuff happened like in the last 5 minutes where like,
Right.
okay, that's where the seed of transformation is.
Right. And
So,
the thing that's cool though is that we're just learning how to do this. And we both have said that we I don't consider our conversation ahead of this small talk. I think it's really important that
for sure.
we're taking people to, leading into something, right? Which it
Yeah.
wasn't just starting. But there is a way in which I think it's also and it's not with everybody, it's not for everybody. It doesn't land well for everybody, that there's just a deep dive, right? Where it's like, okay, we're gonna get right to this. And I do think that happens a lot as a person who has been like I had this recent experience where someone decided that I was in a place where I was the only Black person in this particular market, and the cashier was ringing people up, and the people in front of her, she clearly knew it was a small town. I was up in Oregon, and she clearly knew them, and then it got to me, and she just chose not to speak to me. Really not to look me in the eye, not to speak to me. And at first I thought she couldn't hear me, but then I realized she'd been talking to the 5 people ahead of me, very jovially and whatnot. And I said something, right? But I just deep dove in. And in that moment, it was is really what I needed, right? So I just said to her, "Oh, are you not talking to Black people today?" Right? And she kept ringing and ignoring me. And I said, "Oh, okay, just as long as we're both clear about that, then I'll just stand here quiet, whatnot." And that felt like a deep dive to me because I just went right for it. Like, oh, this is what we're doing. Okay, I get it now. But it's not always appropriate. Sometimes it's better to, but in that moment, I did it in a way of protection, right? But it also, when we're like diving in deep into these really, these things that are important, that weigh on my heart and weigh on your heart too. There's a way that it really helps. And I don't know if that's the same for everybody, but it's just sort of like just getting to it. So that feels okay for me too. Like now that we could have a few more of these conversations, and then people can have a sense of us and how we interact. But it could be a poem and then we just get into it. So tell me about the last time that I don't know,
Okay.
whatever. So I'm open to that too. And I feel like, unfortunately, because distance keeps us apart,
Mm,
and I miss you so much that
I miss you so
I
much.
do feel like sometimes I just want to get to it and be like, and we do oftentimes.
Yeah.
So I think that that's okay too.
So do you want to say anything before we sign off, and we'll
Um, yeah, I'm going to read this couple of lines for you
okay.
from Mark Depot. Awakening writes, "We waste so much energy trying to cover up who we are when beneath every attitude is the want to be loved. And beneath every anger is a wound to be healed. And beneath every sadness is the fear that there will not be enough time." That's it. Thank
Okay.
you so much for having me.
Thank you, Foot Nerds, and anyone else who's listening. We'll see you next
Who's still
time.
here with us? Bye.
Bye.